Welcome back to the Woven Well podcast. Today I'm joined by a friend of the show, Grace Beasley. Grace, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you were on an episode last year where you got to share a little bit about your story and what it was like to work with Woven when you were learning the Creighton system. But
Mhm.
now you're back because you're becoming a fertility care practitioner
That's
yourself.
right. That's right. It's so exciting.
It is exciting. And I'm curious, like, what has it been like to be in the FCP program so far?
It really has been wonderful. I feel like before I started, I was so interested on all this and felt like I knew a lot. Like I want to learn more, but I do already know a lot. I get into the program and I'm like, I do not know a lot. And that's been a great thing
Yeah.
because I've also forgotten how much I love learning.
Mm,
And so it's been neat to just like learn things again. And as I'm learning, I'm wanting to learn more, if that makes sense. Like I
yes.
find myself I'm learning, and then I'm like, oh, but there's this route, and like just discovering things. It kind of feels like my eyes have been opened in a whole new way than
Mm,
when I was just intaking all of this as a client. I was already learning a
yes.
lot myself, but I feel like even more so there's just been more information or more things I'm passionate about too. And
Mm,
so it's been great.
mm. I'm so glad to hear that. I love all of that. That reminds me of my own story because, I was the friend that other friends were asking questions to
Hmm.
about fertility and reproductive health. But really, all I knew at that time was like my own cycles and
Yes.
what I had learned about my own cycles. And so
Yes.
that was way more than what they knew about their cycles, but
Right.
it still was pretty limited. And then
Right.
I joined the education program, started becoming a fertility care practitioner, and I was like, whoa, there is so
So
much
much
more
more.
to learn. Yes. But like you, like so passionate about it.
Yes, and I think that's what's sad is like we as women generally don't know. Like
Yeah.
we don't really know much about our fertility. Even the word fertility. If you would have in college told me the word fertility, I would think pregnancy. Like
Right.
if you're talking about fertility, you're specifically talking about getting pregnant or
Right.
not being able to get pregnant because you don't have good fertility. And it's like no, fertility actually encompasses this whole thing of being a woman. And
Mm,
what does that look like? And this is happening every single day of every single week of every single month. And it's important, even just you saying like your friends were coming to you about the knowledge, but you're like, I don't even know all the things. I'm just learning what about my own body. But there's so much
absolutely.
freedom in knowing someone else is taking authority or ownership of their own fertility.
Mm,
And I could talk to you about it. It's going to differ from woman to woman. Still, you have people to talk to. And I think that's
yeah.
the first step is just knowing, oh, you're caring about this? I could care about this too.
Yeah, being that safe place and having a safe place. So,
Right.
having somebody you can talk to about it. Because you're right, it does affect all of us. From puberty to menopause, we're dealing with it, like you said, every single day
All
in
the
one
time.
form or another. And, I think it's really interesting. You were talking about even the word fertility, and that's such a good point because fertility does often just get talked about when we're thinking about getting pregnant, right?
Yes.
That is the
Yes.
only time. But our fertility as women is kind of the defining feature of us as women. So
Yes.
that makes a lot of people uncomfortable because it's like, wait a minute, I am more than my ability to get pregnant. And
Right.
yes, you are. Every woman is a beautiful, complex human being created in the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
But part of that gift of
Mm-hmm.
humanity, of female humanity,
Yes.
is the ability to conceive and bear children. And
Yes.
so, whether or not someone ever does that, it's a gift to be honored and to be understood. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that's the first, like you were talking about, the first step is to understand what's going on. But we're starting from zero. Like
Yes.
most of us know nothing. And I remember being in college and knowing absolutely nothing about my
Nothing.
reproductive
I
health.
knew nothing.
When I think back on it now, it was mainly period management.
Yep.
Okay, it was like, when do I need to have a tampon with me?
Yes.
And how long is it going to be? And am I going to have to schedule things around any cramps that I'm experiencing? So
Mm.
that's all I knew was period
Right.
management.
I know. I actually recently had listened to one of your previous episodes on the podcast about the theology of the body,
Mm.
of a
Hmm.
woman's body, and just you talking about like God created us different on purpose.
Yes.
And so I recommend people listening to that episode for sure because it was really insightful for me. But just knowing like you're not alone, like
Yeah.
you're experiencing things in your body. Maybe someone else isn't necessarily experiencing that, but they've experienced something else and you're not alone. And their knowledge is such power.
Yeah.
And so to be able to know you have one body and you
Hmm.
have one like sense of fertility in just yourself, and God has given you this one life, why would we not want to know about this? Is how I feel now. Before though,
Yeah.
it not that it was ignorance or naiveness, but I just didn't know about it. Like you said, we're going to talk about fertility when it's time to start having kids. But to me, I want to tell every single woman, it is never too early to start investing in the knowledge of your fertility, in
Yeah.
knowing there is such empowerment
Mm.
to know how God designed my body to be, how God created us to function, and how things that I might be doing might actually be harming that. And I didn't know.
That's
But
right.
that's where the knowledge is power is because if we don't know things like keywords like progesterone, I had never heard of that word before. But now I'm like, oh my word, this is something that every woman is dealing with. And we don't even know those words. I didn't, in my personal experience, I didn't know those words. I didn't know things like I had heard words like you obviously know about ovulation and you know about menstruation, like when you're having your period, your menstrual cycle.
Uh-huh.
But even the phases of like a follicular phase or a luteal phase, those words were like, what are you saying? I don't know what that is and what
Yeah.
that even means. And I think as a woman to be able to know this is what's occurring in my body right now, which can affect how I act, which can affect how I perform in exercise, which can affect what nutrition should I be intaking right now to get the maximum results, so to speak. It just,
Yeah.
oh, it's an inner web that gets me so excited. So,
Oh, I'm so with you. And I feel like, you know, we say we didn't know anything and we're starting from zero. Well, we also kind of live in a time, in a culture, in a mindset that tells us this is something that you put on the shelf and you
mm,
don't take it down until you need it. And then you
yeah.
put it back when you're done with it. It's like something to be used.
Mm,
And that's not our perspective as women of faith. Like, this is who we are. This is a piece of who we are as
right,
women. This is a gift from God. So we automatically know that it's good.
right.
If it's from God, then it is good. And so it's worth understanding more, it's worth appreciating. And that's where I feel like understanding those basics. Like you said, you knew what the term ovulation and menstruation meant. Well, I'm impressed because not everybody knows what ovulation is. So that's
And
probably the
and
the
maybe
first thing.
understanding, I should say, heard the word,
Yes,
not
okay.
necessarily recollecting what that actually means.
Yes. So a lot of us learn about it in 10th grade health and then that's it, you know.
Mhm.
And usually in that class we're like embarrassed and we're like,
Yeah,
we
don't
don't
talk
want to
about
talk about
this.
those kind of things. And so I think understanding ovulation is a great place to start. So let's just
Mhm.
kind of review that really quickly and then
Yeah.
maybe you can talk about the phases that are involved in that just to give people who are listening a basis for this. So ovulation is the process of a female reproductive egg maturing and
Mm,
then leaving the ovary, which you may have heard when you think about the reproductive organs. There's ovaries that have all the eggs that are ever going to be there. Leaving that ovary for the potential of being fertilized by a sperm. So this happens every single cycle, whether that's monthly for you or every 6 weeks, or maybe even further in between. And we can talk
mm.
about why in another episode, probably. But this is happening routinely every single cycle. It doesn't just happen when you're ready to conceive, it
Hmm.
happens from puberty through until menopause. And
Hmm.
so, like you were talking about earlier, this really helps our overall health because there are reproductive hormones that are essential for that process to happen. And so those hormones not only affect our reproductive system, but our overall health as well.
Right. When we are able to know what's actually working, how is this working, I think that really creates so much freedom. This follicle is starting to form inside of that ovary that you mentioned. And that's what then is eventually going to be the egg that's released in ovulation. But those are things that I feel like for me, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that's what's happening. And this is starting to form inside of your body each cycle. And then that's what's going to be released to then meet sperm, have the potential to meet sperm, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And with the luteal phase, like that's coming right before you're about to start your period again. And you might, start experiencing some symptoms that correlate to PMS, which I feel like is a hot, buzzword topic, PMS. But it's something that I feel like our culture also thinks like this is just what happens.
Mm.
This is normal. You should be experiencing, lower back pain. You should be experiencing more cravings towards chocolate, cravings towards carbs, all those things that like we just feel like, oh, I know in college for me, I knew I was about to start my period when I was a little bit more emotional and I really wanted chocolate. Like I just knew, okay, this is about to happen. And now discovering like what the luteal phase is and
Mm.
learning PMS doesn't have to happen like that. Like you don't actually have to have symptoms. And again, linking back to other episodes you've had on your podcast talking about progesterone and
Mm.
how that is related with to PMS symptoms when we don't have enough of it, it can cause those symptoms. Whenever I was your client learning this for the first time, I had no idea. I just thought that's part of a woman's cycle.
Absolutely. I think we think about the period and then it just feels like a month until the next period and then a
Right.
month until the next period, but we don't understand what's going on in between. And the fact that the first day of our period, we already have follicles that are growing with eggs
Yes.
that are recruited for possible ovulation. The fact that estrogen is involved in that
Mm,
follicular phase the whole time to mature those, but we're going to feel signs of that, like you were talking about.
yes.
Like maybe we're more energetic and we want to get projects done. But then after ovulation, as you mentioned, that luteal phase is so
Mm,
important and the role of progesterone in that. And so, as we understand that and we tackle PMS and all the great things that you just mentioned, like we're more informed about our bodies, we're more empowered in how we live our health and how things health wise are going for us. And we feel like we really have an understanding that goes beyond just that plain period management. So,
right.
if I was thinking about things that I would want to know when I was in college, your period is important. So, I don't want you
Yes.
to ignore that. But I would say, like, pay attention to your
Mm,
period because it can actually give you information about your hormone levels, the estrogen, like we were talking about in the follicular phase is going to affect the thickness of the lining, which is going to end up being all the amount of blood that you experience in your period flow. So it can tell us things about even your progesterone level, like
right.
if you're having brown spotting before or after your period starts, maybe your progesterone is not as high as it could be. Painful periods, like you
Mm,
said, they are not normal, but they are common. Okay, so if you're
yes.
missing class, if you're staying home from events from with friends, if you're missing work because you're having painful periods, this is something to look into. Like you said, Grace, we think so often that this is just what's expected of us as women, but that is not the case.
Right.
We should not have to push through these experiences, but we should be able to get answers for that and hopefully get healing and restoration.
Absolutely. And I think with the painful periods, what our culture, what our doctors just want to say is, all right, you just need to get on birth control. because
Mm,
this will just fix that. And that's a whole nother topic for another day. But
sure.
that's something too that I think, especially as women, this is really pushed on us. And to know that there are actually other alternatives to manage,
Yes.
to knowing about your cycle and managing your fertility, that
Yes.
itself is so empowering. And knowing like there are other answers out there. And for me, in my experience, I didn't know that. And
Mm,
to be able to just know there's
yeah.
something else. Like, I think as a woman, it's so important to share when you're learning, share it with other people.
Yeah.
Because more than likely, they have the same questions or don't necessarily know, or maybe have heard something else that you guys can now start this conversation. And I think being able to just talk about it is so freeing.
Mm,
And again, knowledge is power. And it's like just being able, you can go on Pinterest and you can search things about just cycle phases, and how you talked about when we're having estrogen, when we're experiencing our follicular phase, we might have more energy. And there's information out there about there's certain exercises that actually are better for your body during that time
uh-huh.
versus a different time of your cycle, things like that, that
Yeah.
I feel like just sparking the interest.
Very practical.
Very practical things, but they could drastically change your overall improvement of your day-to-day life,
Yeah.
because we might be trying to push, and our bodies can obviously handle a lot. But
Sure.
if we understood, oh, this actually isn't necessarily a time in my cycle that I'm able to push and get the results I'm wanting.
Mm,
If I switch, like it's just learning the tiny switch. It doesn't have to be huge, just a tiny switch of, oh, if I actually focused on doing this a little bit more during this time of my cycle. And that's where it ties back to understanding what is fertility? What is happening
yeah.
in my cycle? So I think that those are
Yeah.
really beneficial for women in any stage, but especially as a young adult, I think is so important because you get to carry that with you.
Absolutely. There are so many ways to get engaged with your reproductive health and your fertility even while you're in college. So,
Mhm.
even the things we're talking about today, like understanding what your fertility is and changing your approach to it. So, really learning more about it, appreciating it. I like the phrase get curious. So,
Yes.
get curious about your cycles.
Yes.
Maybe write down symptoms of anything that feels uncomfortable or you're uncertain about. Maybe it's something that you just assumed is just a part of being a woman, but now after listening to this episode, you're like, maybe it's not. Maybe there's hope. We've talked about PMS, painful periods, irregular cycles. Maybe you're having discharge that you're not sure is normal or not. So these are things that you can actually get answers to. I
Mhm.
would also suggest looking into finding an OBGYN.
Yes.
So a lot of times, women in college are like, I don't know if I need that yet. But you don't necessarily have to get a pap smear in order to work with an OBGYN. Grace, we would encourage people to work with a restorative reproductive
Absolutely.
OBGYN because they're going to help you to understand what's going on in your reproductive health. They're not thinking necessarily about pregnancy for you at all. It's wherever you are in your personal reproductive timeline. So
Mhm.
helping you to understand your cycle. And then, lastly, and maybe this kind of applies to all the rest, is to learn a form of fertility awareness.
Yes.
So, when you get on birth control, you learn nothing about your body or its design. You
No.
you gain nothing from that experience when it comes to knowledge and health. But when you use a form of fertility awareness, you have so much information. You are empowered in so many different ways. You can actually advocate for yourself in the doctor's office. You can get accurate
Mhm.
diagnoses. You can get treatment that is holistic and is going to improve your overall quality of health. And you're thinking about long term health too, not just in this particular moment, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Grace, it was fun chatting with you. I know that there are a lot of college ladies who are going to benefit from your education as a fertility care practitioner.
Thanks so much for having me.
Listeners, as always, thanks for listening as we continue to explore together what it means to be woven well.